What if the book of Psalms is not simply something to read, but a place you enter? Imagine opening the pages and realizing that you are not stepping into poetry, but into the inner world of people who lived with joy and fear, victory and loss, faith and confusion. Before the songs became scripture, they were human voices trying to understand God. And as soon as you begin, something strange happens. Their questions start to sound like your own. Their struggles feel familiar. Their hope feels possible. This is where the journey begins, not with information, but with an invitation. Stay with me, because what you are about to discover inside the book of Psalms will challenge the way you see spirituality, emotion, and your connection with God. And as you hear this, comment below what part of the Psalms has spoken to you before, and make sure you subscribe so you do not miss the next steps of this exploration. The first thing you notice when you enter Psalms is that it does not try to impress you. It meets you where you really are. It does not hide pain. It does not hide fear. It does not hide questions. It also does not hide the moments when the writers felt overwhelmed, lost, or even abandoned. Instead, it places those moments in front of you, showing you that faith is not built on perfection, but on honesty. This alone interrupts the expectation many people have about the Bible. Instead of demanding silence or strength, Psalms opens the conversation and asks you to speak, to think, to feel. This is why the book has survived thousands of years. It does not tell you to be someone else. It invites you to bring your true self into the presence of God. But something else stands out. Psalms is not the work of one voice. It is a collection of voices, each one shaped by different backgrounds and different seasons of life. David writes with the urgency of someone who survived attacks and betrayals. Moses writes with the weight of a man who led a nation through the wilderness. Solomon writes with the mind of a ruler who has seen the complexities of wisdom and power. The sons of Korah write with the perspective of a family who carried both a painful past and a redeemed future. Together, they form a record of human experience that stretches across time. And because of that, every person who listens to their words eventually finds their own story somewhere inside these pages. As you continue through the book, something interesting happens. You begin to sense a rhythm, almost like entering a path that leads from crisis to clarity. The book is structured in 5 sections, echoing the 5 books of Moses. This is not accidental. It creates a pattern that guides the reader from brokenness to restoration, from questioning to confidence, from darkness to joy. The structure itself becomes a journey. You begin at the bottom of the valley and slowly rise toward a peak where everything ends in praise. The more you read, the more you feel that you are being pulled forward, step by step, as if the book itself knows that your heart needs time to heal and room to grow. And yet, the Psalms remain completely honest. They do not promise that life will always be calm or predictable. Instead, they show how real people responded to real struggles. They prayed while running from enemies. They cried out while feeling forgotten. They celebrated when they saw God act. They waited when nothing seemed to change. They expressed hope when hope felt impossible. This range of emotion creates a connection that is difficult to ignore. You start to feel that the writers were not trying to impress anyone. They were trying to survive. They were trying to understand. They were trying to stay close to God, even when life pushed them in the opposite direction. This honesty is what makes Psalms so powerful for modern readers. Many people struggle to find the right words when they pray. They feel overwhelmed or guilty or helpless. The Psalms give them language when they have none. They give shape to emotions that are difficult to explain. They express fear without shame and faith without arrogance. This combination creates a bridge between human frailty and divine presence. You do not have to hide anything. You do not have to pretend. You do not have to understand everything. You only need to bring your heart exactly as it is. The Psalms show that God listens to those who speak honestly, not only to those who speak confidently. As the chapters continue, the book begins to reveal one of its deepest truths. Faith is not defined by the absence of questions. It is defined by what you do with those questions. Some psalms begin in fear and end in peace. Others begin in joy and end in reflection. Some begin with anger and end with surrender. Some begin with confusion and end with trust. The transformation does not happen because the problem disappears. It happens because the writer chooses to face the problem in the presence of God. This quiet shift is one of the most important psychological elements of the book. It keeps the reader engaged, waiting to see how each emotional struggle will resolve. It builds anticipation. It makes you want to continue. But the Psalms do more than express emotion. They shape the way you see the world. They challenge you to remember what God has done in the past so you can stand firm in the present. They remind you that God is faithful even when circumstances appear unstable. They teach you to replace panic with perspective, fear with trust, and isolation with connection. They pull your attention away from the chaos around you and place it on something unchanging. This shift in focus is one of the reasons the book is so widely loved. It pulls the reader out of emotional confusion and into clarity. At the same time, the Psalms contain a continuous call to relationship. They teach you to speak, to listen, to reflect, to question, and to rest. They show that God is near to those who feel weak and close to those who feel lost. They reveal that worship is not about singing songs. It is about turning your heart toward God in every stage of life. When you feel joyful, you worship. When you feel uncertain, you worship. When you feel broken, you worship. When you feel grateful, you worship. This consistent message shapes the entire experience of the book. It slowly trains the heart to recognize God's presence everywhere. As you reach the final chapters of the book, something remarkable happens. The tension that has been building through all the struggles, questions, and conflicts begins to release. The last Psalms explode with confidence and praise. It is as if the entire journey has been leading to this moment. The voices that once cried for help now call for celebration. The hearts that were once heavy now lift in gratitude. The story that began with uncertainty ends with clarity. This transformation is not just inspiring, it is evidence that the writers discovered something profound about God's nature, something they believed was worth passing on to every generation after them. This is why the Book of Psalms remains alive today. It speaks to every kind of person in every kind of situation. It offers comfort when nothing makes sense. It strengthens you when you feel weak. It guides you when you feel lost. It stands with you when you feel alone, and it teaches you that God does not need perfect people. He meets real people in real life with real problems. The Psalms remind you that your voice matters, your emotions matter, and your journey matters. Comment the word Psalms if this journey is already speaking to you, and make sure you subscribe so you do not miss the next part of this journey. The deeper we explore, the clearer the message becomes. The Psalms were never meant to stay on the page. They were meant to enter your heart and change the way you see God, the way you see life, and the way you see yourself. Before we continue deeper into this journey, let me ask you something that may sound simple, but opens a powerful door. When was the last time you stopped everything, even for a moment, and acknowledged something greater than yourself? Not out of habit, not because someone told you to, but because your heart felt pulled in that direction. For many people, this feeling appears in quiet moments, in unexpected places, or during difficult days when strength feels low. And this is exactly where the Psalms begin to transform the reader. They do not introduce worship as a ritual. They reveal it as a response. And once you understand this, the whole book becomes something new. Before we go further, write in the comments which emotion you feel most often when you read Psalms: peace, hope, confusion, or gratitude, and make sure you subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. Worship in the Psalms does not behave the way many people expect. It is not polished, it is not formal, it is not distant. It appears in caves, deserts, battles, and sleepless nights. It comes from people running for their lives, from kings facing betrayal, from singers overwhelmed by fear, and from believers who could not see a way forward. This is what makes the message so compelling. The writers show that worship is not something you do when life is perfect. It is something you do when life is real. This immediately breaks the pattern the audience expects and introduces a new way of thinking. Many listeners pause here, not because they plan to, but because they recognize themselves in these moments. If you continue through the Psalms with this in mind, a pattern begins to appear. The writers are not worshiping because everything is right. They worship because they know who God is even when nothing else makes sense. This creates a tension that pulls the viewer forward. If they could praise during danger, why did they do it? What did they discover in those moments? Why does their worship sound stronger in their darkest seasons than in their brightest victories? These questions keep the viewer's attention active, not passive. This is the psychology that keeps retention high. Curiosity leads the listener to want the next line, because every line answers one question while raising another. As David writes about praising God at all times, we learn something important. Worship is not a reaction to emotion. It is a decision based on identity. And this identity is not about personal greatness. It is about recognizing that God is stable even when we are not. This is why the Psalms show worship happening in both celebration and crisis. The focus is not on the circumstance. The focus is on the one who remains the same in every circumstance. This simple truth creates a shift inside the reader's mind. It interrupts their assumptions and replaces them with clarity. But the Psalms do not only show why we worship, they show what worship does. When people praise God in the Psalms, something begins to change inside them. They do not always receive answers immediately. They do not always see the result they want, but they gain perspective. Fear becomes smaller, stress becomes quieter, confusion becomes lighter. This is not a magical effect. It is psychological and spiritual. Worship redirects attention from fear to stability, from chaos to order, from worry to something unchanging. This shift creates emotional relief, and the viewer feels it as they listen. It becomes a pattern interruption in their own mind. The book also shows how worship can be expressed in different ways. Sometimes it sounds loud and joyful. Other times it sounds quiet and almost whispered. Sometimes it comes from a group. Other times it comes from a single voice in the dark. This diversity keeps the reader engaged because the message feels real. It covers every type of moment a human can experience, and instead of teaching worship through rules, the Psalms reveal it through real lives. This makes the message easy to understand and hard to ignore. Another important detail is how worship works as a reminder. Many Psalms begin with fear or sorrow, but end with confidence. The writer does not deny their problems. They simply place them in a different position. They shift their focus to God's character, His past actions, and His promises. This process is built into the structure of many Psalms. It is almost like walking through a hallway that begins in confusion and ends in clarity. The transformation happens gradually, line by line. And this gradual progression keeps the listener connected, waiting for the turning point. At the same time, the Psalms show that worship is not only personal, it is also communal. When the writers call others to join them, they are not trying to create a performance. They are creating unity. They are saying, "You do not go through this alone." They invite people to stand together, to sing together, to remember together. This collective expression creates a sense of belonging that many people crave, especially when they feel isolated or overwhelmed. This element strengthens the emotional impact of the message because it reminds the viewer that their struggles and joys are shared experiences, not private battles. But perhaps the most striking thing the Psalms reveal is that worship is not dependent on understanding the future. It is rooted in trusting God in the present. The writers do not wait to worship until they have the answers. They worship while waiting for the answers. This creates a powerful tension that keeps the audience emotionally invested. Everyone knows what it feels like to wait, to worry, to hope for clarity. The Psalms speak directly to that tension, showing that worship can exist even before resolution. This honesty is what gives the book its strength. Toward the end of many worship-based psalms, a shift becomes noticeable. The tone moves from fear to courage, from confusion to direction, from weakness to strength. The writers often end with renewed trust, not because the situation has changed, but because their perspective has. This pattern creates an emotional reward that encourages the listener to stay engaged. The message begins to feel like progress, like movement, like a journey with purpose. As you reflect on all of this, take a moment and write in the comments which type of worship moment speaks most to you. The joyful songs, the quiet prayers, the cries for help, or the declarations of trust. It helps build a community of reflection, and it also supports this content so it can reach more people. And make sure you subscribe so you do not miss the continuation of this journey, because each part of the Psalms reveals a new layer of understanding that builds on the last. The more we explore, the clearer it becomes that worship in the Psalms is not about perfection. It is about honesty. It is about choosing to lift your thoughts towards something greater, even when your heart feels heavy. It is about remembering what God has done so you can stand firm in what you are facing now. It is about recognizing that worship is not an escape from reality. It is a way to remain grounded in truth while walking through reality. And as we continue into the next part of this journey, prepare yourself, because the book of Psalms does not stop at worship. It leads you toward deeper connection, stronger trust, and a clearer understanding of how to approach God with every part of your life. What comes next will challenge the way you see prayer, emotion, and personal devotion. There is a moment, somewhere between silence and thought, where you become aware of your own inner world. It usually happens when everything around you slows down for a second. Your mind is full, your heart is heavy or hopeful, and suddenly you realize you are searching for something deeper, something that gives meaning to the confusion, direction to the questions, and calm to the uncertainty. This moment is not accidental. It is the same moment that shaped many of the Psalms. They were written by people standing at the edge of their own thoughts, unsure of what to say, yet unable to stay quiet. And this is what makes this next part of the journey so compelling. Before we go further, comment below one thing. When you pray or reflect, do you speak out loud, write your thoughts, or stay silent? And remember to subscribe so you do not miss the next chapters of this exploration. Personal devotion in the Psalms does not begin with perfect words. It begins with need. It begins with longing. It begins with a heart trying to connect with God even when it does not know how. Many people think that prayer must be structured or elegant, but when you read the Psalms closely, you discover that most prayers begin with a single, honest sentence. Sometimes it is a cry for help. Sometimes it is a declaration of trust. Sometimes it is a question. Sometimes it is a confession. The simplicity of these beginnings interrupts expectations and pulls the listener in. It shows that devotion is not based on performance. It is based on sincerity. What makes this so powerful is that the Psalms show every kind of emotional state. They show a person who feels strong one moment and lost the next. They show someone who feels close to God and then suddenly distant. They show a heart that shifts between certainty and doubt. This unpredictability creates psychological engagement because it feels real. The listener recognizes their own inconsistencies in the words of people who lived thousands of years ago. And that connection is what sets the stage for deep retention. You stay because you feel seen. As you move deeper into the Psalms, a new pattern begins to emerge. The writers were not only speaking to God, they were speaking to themselves. They were trying to calm their thoughts, remind themselves of truth, and resist discouragement. Each line becomes a conversation between emotion and understanding. This internal dialogue makes the text relatable because everyone has experienced moments when their thoughts become loud and confusing. The Psalms give language to those moments, guiding the reader through self-awareness and surrender. One of the most important elements of personal devotion in the Psalms is desire. Many Psalms begin with a longing that is almost uncomfortable in its honesty. The writers admit their weakness, their emptiness, their hunger for closeness with God. This longing creates tension because desire always raises a question. Will it be fulfilled? The listener waits for the answer, line after line, hoping to see how the writer resolves the struggle. This anticipation keeps the viewer engaged, wanting to understand how someone approaches God from such an emotionally raw place. But desire alone is not the center of personal devotion. The Psalms show that devotion grows through habit, not a rigid habit, but a consistent return. The writers return to God in the morning, at night, during trouble, during peace. They do not wait for the right conditions. They turn to Him as they are. This consistency teaches something essential. Devotion is not measured by how you feel. It is measured by who you turn to. This shift challenges the listener's assumptions and creates a pattern interruption. Instead of waiting for spiritual motivation, the Psalms show that devotion is a set of choices that build the foundation of inner strength. Meditation in the Psalms also looks different from what many people imagine. It is not about emptying the mind. It is about filling it. It is about taking time to sit with God's words, letting them shape your thoughts instead of letting fear or confusion take over. This kind of meditation helps the reader understand why the book has remained important for so long. It does not offer complicated rituals. It offers simple practices that transform the way a person thinks, reacts, and believes. The reader begins to see meditation as something accessible rather than distant. As the Psalms guide us through prayer and reflection, a deeper truth begins to emerge. Personal devotion is not passive. It requires openness. It requires courage. Many Psalms reveal hidden fears, unspoken regrets, and unanswered questions. The writers do not hide their emotional struggles. They bring them directly to God. This transparency shows that devotion is not about pretending everything is fine. It is about admitting that everything is not fine while trusting that God remains close. This honesty builds emotional resonance with the listener because it aligns with real life. One of the most striking features of the Psalms is how often the writers ask for guidance. They want to know what to do. They want direction. They want clarity. But more than anything, they want to be led. This desire to be guided creates a subtle tension that keeps the audience listening. It reflects the universal human experience of trying to make wise decisions without certainty. The Psalms do not promise instant answers. Instead, they show a process of waiting, listening, and trusting. This process itself becomes meaningful because the viewer learns to value the journey, not only the destination. Stillness is another unexpected dimension of devotion in the Psalms. Many People avoid stillness because silence makes their thoughts louder. But the Psalms invite the reader to pause, breathe, and give space for clarity to arrive. Stillness shifts attention from external noise to internal truth. It becomes a moment where the heart opens and the mind resets. This element creates a calming effect within the narrative, balancing the emotional intensity with quiet reflection. It also increases retention because it contrasts with the earlier tension, creating a rhythm that keeps the listener engaged. As you continue through the Psalms, you begin to sense that devotion is not a one-time event. It is a journey. Some days are filled with confidence, others are filled with confusion. Some moments carry gratitude, others carry need. The writers show that devotion grows in cycles, in return, in repetition. This makes the message practical and realistic. It removes the pressure of perfection and replaces it with consistency. And now, as we reach this point of the journey, take a moment to comment something specific. Write the word seeking if you have ever asked God for guidance in a moment of uncertainty. It helps build connection in the community here, and it also supports the content so it can reach more people. And do not forget to subscribe so you stay with us through every chapter of this series. What becomes clear is that the Psalms do not teach devotion through theory. They teach it through experience. They show people learning to trust, learning to listen, learning to rest. They show how devotion changes a person from the inside out, not through pressure but through presence, not through perfection but through honesty, and not through immediate answers but through continued return. If you are ready, we continue next into a part of the Psalms that many people avoid but desperately need: the raw, unfiltered language of lament. This next chapter will challenge how you see emotion, faith, and vulnerability. Stay with me. There is a point in every spiritual journey where the questions become louder than the answers. It often arrives without warning. You may have been feeling stable, hopeful, even confident, until something shakes the foundation you were standing on. It can be a loss, a disappointment, a delay, or a moment that forces you to confront the emotions you tried to ignore. And when that moment hits, it feels like everything stops. The Psalms do not hide this stage. In fact, they walk directly into it. They reveal a part of faith that many people avoid, yet every person experiences. Before we continue, write one word in the comments that describes how your heart has felt this month, and make sure you subscribe so you do not miss the next parts of this journey. This part of the Psalms is not comfortable. It is not polished. It is not inspirational in the usual sense. It is raw. It is vulnerable. It is honest. It shows people who are trying to hold themselves together while feeling like they are falling apart. It shows prayers that begin with frustration rather than confidence. It shows emotions that many believers hesitate to express. And this is exactly why it matters. Lament is the language of the soul when it no longer knows what to do with pain. What makes lament so compelling is the tension it creates. The writers feel abandoned, yet they still speak to God. They feel confused, yet they still reach out. They feel overwhelmed, yet they refuse to silence themselves. This emotional contradiction draws the listener in because it mirrors real life. People often think faith means staying calm or pretending everything is fine, but when you enter the lament psalms, you discover the opposite. These prayers begin where the human heart usually breaks. One of the first things you notice is that lament does not start gently. It begins with strong questions. How long? Why? Where are you? These questions interrupt the listener's expectation because they sound like thoughts many people keep hidden. The psychological impact is immediate. The viewer feels seen, they feel understood, they feel permission to acknowledge their own struggles. And this recognition creates emotional connection, which increases retention. But lament is not only about expression, it is about honesty with intention. The writers are not complaining to complain. They are trying to find meaning. They are trying to stay close to God even when they cannot feel Him. They are trying to understand their fear, not ignore it. This process gives the audience insight into their own emotions. Instead of running from pain, the Psalms teach them to examine it. Instead of hiding sorrow, they confront it. This approach helps the viewer stay engaged because every line offers a new perspective they might not have considered. The pacing of lament is also unique. It begins heavy, but as you continue, something subtle starts to shift. The tone changes slowly, almost quietly. The writer begins to remember. They remember moments when God was present. They remember help that came at unexpected times. They remember promises that still stand. This gentle shift introduces hope without forcing it, which creates anticipation. The listener begins to wonder when the turning point will come. They stay focused, waiting for the movement from despair to stability. One of the most powerful elements of lament is that it gives voice to emotions that many people suppress. Pain, fear, anger, loneliness, these feelings appear often in the Psalms. But instead of shaming these emotions, the writers bring them directly to God. This action interrupts the common belief that strong faith means hiding difficult feelings. Instead, the Psalms show that strong faith begins by revealing them. This approach helps viewers reflect on their own internal battles in a safe, guided way. As you move through lament Psalms, you notice a recurring dynamic. Honesty leads to clarity. Not immediate clarity, but gradual clarity. The writer begins to see their situation differently. They begin to understand that God's silence is not abandonment. They begin to realize that God's timing is not neglect. They begin to trust that their emotions, while real, do not define the final outcome. This gradual transformation keeps the audience engaged because each thought leads directly into the next. The narrative pulls them forward. Another important aspect is how lament creates intimacy. The writers reveal the most private parts of their hearts. They speak openly about their weaknesses, their fears, their guilt. This vulnerability builds a deeper relationship between the writer and God. And for the viewer, it creates a sense of closeness with the text. Many people never express their struggles because they fear judgment, but the Psalms show that God welcomes truth more than appearances. Still, lament does not end with emotion, it moves toward trust. At the end of many lament psalms, a shift appears. The writer does not always receive answers, but they receive perspective. They remember God's mercy. They remember His protection. They remember His promises. This final shift is what gives lament its strength. It transforms the pain without denying it. It teaches the listener that trust does not require full understanding. It requires honesty and surrender. This movement from brokenness to trust is what keeps the audience engaged. It feels like a journey with emotional payoff. It gives the listener hope because it shows that lament is not a place you stay in. It is a place you pass through. And passing through it teaches you something important. You can bring every part of yourself to God. Now pause for a moment and write in the comments one specific thing. Type the word honest if you have ever prayed from a place of pain. It helps build a community of people who are walking this journey together, and it also supports this content so it can reach more people. And remember to subscribe so you stay connected as we continue through each chapter of this series. As this section of the Psalms closes, the message becomes clear. Lament is not weakness. It is not failure. It is not a lack of faith. It is an essential part of the spiritual journey. It helps you face the emotions you cannot control. It brings you closer to God through honesty, not performance. It teaches you to stand, not by ignoring your pain, but by bringing it into His presence. This is the foundation for what comes next, the transition from sorrow to resilience, from questioning to confidence, from emotional chaos to renewed trust. And in the next chapter, we will see how the Psalms lead us into hope. There are moments in life when you feel like you are walking without a map. You put one foot in front of the other, but the path ahead feels uncertain. The future seems blurred, and even the things you once relied on start to shift beneath you. In times like this, people often search for something steady, something that cannot be shaken no matter what changes around them. This is where the book of Psalms speaks with surprising force. It does not pretend the world is stable. It acknowledges that everything can fall apart, yet in that same breath it reveals a foundation that remains unbroken. Before we go deeper, comment the word anchor if you have ever needed stability in a difficult moment, and make sure you subscribe so you do not miss the next chapters of this journey. Hope in the Psalms is different from the way most people use that word. It is not a wish. It is not optimism. It is not pretending everything will work out. It is confidence in something that does not move even when everything else does. This type of hope appears again and again throughout the book. It grows through hardship. It survives disappointment. It stays alive in the darkest valleys. And what makes it even more compelling is that it often appears when the writers have run out of strength. The most powerful declarations of hope come from people who felt surrounded by danger or weighed down by fear. This contrast creates immediate tension that pulls the listener in. How can someone express confidence when their circumstances seem hopeless? How can a person declare, "I will not fear," while standing in the middle of chaos? These questions trigger curiosity. They push the viewer to keep listening, searching for the missing piece that makes this kind of confidence possible. And that missing piece becomes clearer the deeper you explore the Psalms. The writers saw God not only as a distant ruler, but as a present protector. They believed He was a refuge, a shelter, a source of strength that did not disappear in difficult moments. This perspective shifts the entire emotional landscape of the Psalms. Fear does not vanish, but it loses control. Anxiety does not disappear, but it no longer defines the outcome. The writers still face danger, loss, and uncertainty, but they stand within it rather than collapse under it. This produces a powerful psychological effect on the reader. It offers a way to feel grounded, even when life feels unstable. Another striking feature of hope in the Psalms is its connection to memory. The writers often remind themselves of what God has done before. They recall moments of rescue, provision, healing, and guidance. These memories become anchors that stabilize their minds when emotions begin to spiral. This element creates a natural pattern interruption in the text. Just when the writer begins to sink into despair, they pull themselves upward through remembrance. And this pattern, repeated throughout the Psalms, trains the reader to do the same. It teaches them that hope grows not from ignoring the past, but from remembering it accurately. The Psalms also show that hope does not always arrive quickly. Sometimes it appears after a long struggle. Sometimes it takes pages of questions before the tone shifts. This slow progression keeps the reader engaged because it mirrors the real process of emotional recovery. People do not jump from fear to confidence instantly. There is a journey between the two. The Psalms take the reader through that journey step by step, allowing the transformation to feel natural rather than forced. One of the most powerful ways the Psalms communicate hope is through imagery of safety. God is described as a refuge, a shelter, a shield. These descriptions are not dramatic. They are practical. They show a God who provides support rather than distance. This view helps the listener feel personally included in the message. The hope is not abstract. It is relational. It is based on trust, not on circumstances. It teaches that stability is found in who God is, not in what is happening around you. As you read deeper, another pattern becomes clear. Hope in the Psalms often appears during moments of vulnerability. When the writers feel overwhelmed, they turn to God for strength. When they feel lost, they look for guidance. When they feel attacked, they seek protection. This continuous return shapes the structure of many psalms. It creates emotional momentum. The reader is pulled forward by the desire to see how the writer will find clarity. This structure increases retention because each line leads to the next with purpose. Hope is also connected to confidence in God's character. The writers believe that God is faithful, just, and attentive. They do not claim that life is easy. They claim that God is present. This difference changes everything. It removes the pressure to understand every detail. It replaces fear with trust. It helps the reader breathe more deeply, knowing that the outcome is not solely in their hands. This psychological release is one of the reasons why the Psalms remain comforting to people across generations. Another important detail is how hope transforms perspective. The writers do not deny the existence of danger or difficulty. They simply refuse to see those things as the final reality. They acknowledge the problem but focus on God's strength. This shift in attention creates emotional resilience. It teaches that hope is not denial, it is direction. It is choosing where to place your mind. This approach helps the viewer apply the message to their own life as they listen. As the Psalms move toward their closing sections, hope becomes louder. The tone rises from quiet trust to confident praise. The writers begin to speak with boldness. They describe God as their light, their salvation, their protector. This rise in tone engages the listener on a deeper emotional level. It delivers an emotional reward for staying through the tension earlier in the text. It gives the audience a sense of movement, of victory, of renewal. Before we continue to the next part of the journey, pause for a moment and comment the phrase, "My hope is in Him." It helps strengthen the community forming here and supports this content so it can reach more people. And make sure you subscribe so you stay connected through every chapter. As this part closes, the message becomes clear. Hope in the Psalms is not theoretical. It is something lived, something tested, something proven. It survives storms, losses, and silent nights. It grows in seasons of uncertainty. It may start small, but it becomes strong because it is rooted in God, not in circumstances. And with this foundation established, the journey now moves toward a new dimension of the Psalms, one that challenges how we understand strength, trust, and the presence of God in the hardest moments. There is a moment near the end of every great journey when you pause and look back at everything you passed through. You see the mountains you climbed, the valleys you crossed, the doubts that tried to stop you, and the strength you gained without realizing it. The book of Psalms creates this same moment. After walking through worship, devotion, lament, trust, and hope, you begin to sense that something bigger has been forming in the background, something that ties every emotion, every prayer, every struggle together. And right when you think you understand the pattern, the Psalms reveal another layer that pulls you deeper. Before we continue, comment the word journey if this series has helped you see the Psalms in a new way, and make sure you subscribe so you do not miss the next chapters we will explore on this channel. As you reach the final stretch of the Psalms, the tone shifts again. It becomes wider, larger, almost like the writers are stepping back to show a bigger picture. You realize that the Psalms are not only about personal experience, they are also about something unfolding across generations, something connected to justice, purpose, and the future. The writers begin to speak about a coming king, a ruler who would bring peace, fairness, and restoration. This is not political, it is spiritual. It is the belief that the world, even with all its chaos and suffering, is moving toward a moment where everything broken will be restored. This theme appears gradually, like a thread woven through various psalms. You see it in the promises of a king who would reign with wisdom. You see it in the hope for a leader who would bring justice to the poor and dignity to the oppressed. You see it in declarations that all nations would one day recognize God's authority. These passages interrupt the usual emotional rhythm of the book. They pull the reader out of personal pain and place them inside a larger story. This perspective shift creates a psychological lift. It replaces the weight of individual struggle with the hope of collective purpose. As the Psalms describe this future king, they reveal something unexpected. This ruler is not just powerful, he is righteous. He does not lead through force, but through justice. He does not lift himself up. He lifts others. He brings clarity where there is confusion, healing where there is harm, and truth where there is deception. This type of leadership creates a sense of longing inside the reader. You begin to recognize how deeply humans desire a world where truth wins, where fairness matters, and where peace lasts. The Psalms go further. They describe a leader whose authority is not temporary. His rule is eternal. His influence does not fade. His promises do not expire. This long-term perspective interrupts the way many people think about power. It shifts focus from temporary solutions to lasting transformation. This difference captures the viewer's attention because it speaks to something everyone wants: stability, meaning, and direction that will not disappear. But the Psalms do not stop with the vision of a king. They move into wisdom. They show that those who follow God's ways live with clarity and purpose. Wisdom in the Psalms is not intellectual. It is practical. It is the ability to act with integrity, to choose what is right, to avoid destructive paths, and to stand firm when life pushes back. This idea strengthens the reader by showing that life is not random. It is shaped by choices, habits, and alignment with truth. As the text advances, you begin to understand that wisdom is presented as a foundation. It is the structure that holds a person steady. It helps you navigate conflict, temptation, and uncertainty. It teaches you how to guard your heart, how to speak with honesty, and how to live with intention. Wisdom becomes the voice that guides you through complicated situations and reminds you of who you are when circumstances become confusing. The Psalms use wisdom to transition into reflection. The writers examine their lives. They ask God to search their hearts, to correct their thoughts, to protect them from harmful paths. This vulnerability creates emotional resonance because it mirrors what many people feel but rarely say. Everyone wants clarity. Everyone wants to know they are making the right choices. Everyone wants guidance. The Psalms give language to those desires and reconnect the reader with the idea that God responds to those who seek Him sincerely. As the book moves toward its final Psalms, everything begins to converge. Worship, devotion, lament, trust, hope, wisdom, and prophecy flow together into a single message. God is present, God is faithful, and God is worthy of praise. The tone rises. The words become stronger. The energy lifts. It feels like the emotional build-up from the entire book has reached its highest point. This rise in tone produces a psychological reward. It gives the listener a sense of victory. It answers the tension created earlier in the journey. It promises that no matter what has happened, God's goodness remains. The final Psalms do not deny the existence of pain. They simply declare that pain does not have the final word. They do not ignore the past. They celebrate how far the journey has brought the writer. They do not pretend that life is simple. They affirm that God is greater than every complexity. The closer you get to the end, the clearer the message becomes. Everything in the Psalms, from the deepest sorrow to the highest praise, leads to the same truth. God is steady. God is near. God is worthy. This closing pattern creates a strong emotional impression. It leaves the listener feeling lifted rather than drained. It brings closure without removing mystery. It gives comfort without erasing reality. It turns the Psalms into a space where every season of the human heart finds a place to rest. Before we end this journey, take a moment to comment a specific phrase. Write, "He is faithful," to affirm the message the Psalms have revealed and to join others who are walking this same journey. Your comment helps this content reach more people who need it, and it builds a community of reflection and encouragement. As this final part closes, the message is simple but powerful. The Psalms are not just ancient writings. They are a mirror of human experience and a window into God's heart. They show you what it means to speak honestly, to trust deeply, to hope boldly, and to live with purpose. They remind you that you are never alone in your emotions or your questions. And they invite you into a relationship with God that is real, steady, and strong. If you want to continue receiving this kind of content, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you do not miss what comes next.